Hey everyone, it's Philip with the Everyday Fighter podcast, and I wanted to welcome you to this episode. Today we are talking with Brian King. Brian is an ADHD coach, so he helps individuals and families that have been diagnosed with ADHD to navigate the challenges that might present themselves with that. But he is also an accomplished and experienced martial artist. We talk about his journey growing up and having to deal with bullies and how he got some really unique help from my point of view doing that. It sounded like a movie when he was describing it in the interview. So I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback about that. We'll also talk about some of the unique challenges that he has had and how he's overcome those, as well as how he has introduced his family, particularly his one of his sons, to martial arts and some of the philosophies that he's learned through that relationship. I really enjoyed this interview, and I hope that you do too. But before we get into the interview itself, I did want to bring something to your attention. This is something that I'll be doing from time to time, and much like these folks that I'm interviewing, these everyday fighters, that they have great stories. They might not be celebrities, they might not be champions in the ring or have a lot of accolades to them, but they have stories, they have insights, they have wisdom to impart, and that's one of the things that I wanted to bring to the forefront here. But there are also a lot of different causes that I think deserve a bit more attention than they get, and one of them I wanted to bring to your attention today was an organization called Raising Men Lawn Care Service, and they're based out of Huntsville, Alabama. Now, full disclosure, they have no idea that I'm doing this. They are not a sponsor of the show, but this is actually just one guy and a friend of his, but one guy, Rodney, he just had the idea of helping people that couldn't otherwise help themselves, particularly in taking care of their lawns and yards. So, some folks, maybe they are challenged physically, maybe they're the elderly, maybe they're just impaired in some way, so that they can't even take care of their lawns, and they may not have the money to have somebody else do it for them. Well, Rodney took it upon himself to get a lawnmower. At the time, I don't believe he even had his own lawnmower. Don't hold me to that. But he just offered to help people, complete strangers, with their lawn. So he'd cut their lawn, he'd rake up their leaves, he'd rake up the trimmings, and they would have a nice, clean, trim lawn. And I've been following him for quite a few years now, and he just never ceases to amaze me what he does. One of them being that he takes children and he challenges them to do the same thing for people that need similar help in their communities. So he has what they call the 50-yard challenge. So any child, anybody, quite frankly, even an adult that wants to take on the challenge, they'll write into him, and as they complete a certain number of yards, much like the martial arts, they get a new colored T-shirt for their efforts. So they start off with a white T-shirt with Raising Men Lawn Care Service on it, and then as they go from 10 to 20, all the way up to 50 yards, they'll go through different colored T-shirts, and when they get the 50 yards, they get their black T-shirt, similar to like getting a black belt in the martial arts. They're just doing great things. He does lawns 50 in every single state in the country, so 50 yards minimum in 50 states. I think he's done that a couple of years in a row now, but I'm really not doing them any justice just gabbing like this. You can really see for yourself. All you have to do is go to their website at weareraisingmen.com, and then you can get all the information there. You can get the link to their Facebook and all that as well. So I just wanted to bring them to your attention. And with that, let's get into the interview with Brian King. Listening in, like, who's Brian King?
Well, I'll try and be as succinct as possible. My life has been an unpaved road. It's not even a bumpy road. It's unpaved.
It's unpaved.
Unpaved. No shoulder, no off ramp, potholes galore. Yeah. I grew up with undiagnosed ADHD and dyslexia. School was really hard. I was bullied a lot as a kid. I was shy. I was weak. I was not a sporto, clumsy as all get out. My graduation present from high school was stage 3 testicular cancer.
From high school?
So, from high school, yeah. So 3 weeks before high school is when the tumor was removed. A month after high school graduation, the tumor came back. So I spent the summer in chemotherapy. Then I tried to kind of fumble around and find what I wanted to do with the rest of my life once the cancer went away. I got married, was very impulsive kind of thing. Ended up having 3 kids, all 3 of whom have various forms of autism as well as ADHD. Got divorced. The ex, left me and the boys to go find her greener pasture, which didn't work out for her. Rarely ever does. So I became a single dad to the 3 special needs boys for a while. Then I got remarried. And within the past 5 years, I've been diagnosed with 2 chronic conditions. One is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means my ligaments and tendons are too slack. So when I stand up and use my body, the weight of my body stretches my ligaments and tendons out to the point where they no longer support my joints. So things start to slip out of place and get stuck, like kneecaps, bones in my feet, my thumb. You'll hear a popping. I can reach over my head and my collarbone will partially dislocate. It's a lot of fun. And then I got to pop that sucker back in and you can hear it from across the room. And last year I was diagnosed with MS. So I have that on top of everything else. But in the midst of all of my maladies, I still got 3 kids to raise. And they have their respective challenges, many of which I share. And I don't want them to see somebody who is whining and complaining and throwing in the towel and signing up for disability and saying, it's your role in life, it's your destiny to live off the government and set a really low bar for yourself. That's not what I want them to see. I want them to see somebody who is resilient, resourceful, who doesn't make excuses, because they need to know that that's an option for them. So that kind of in the nutshell is how I got here, what I do. What I do for my, I don't even want to say 9 to 5 because it's a 24-hour thing, is I spend my working days coaching parents and teens that have ADHD or Asperger's. Got clients all over the globe. And one of the main outcomes I create for them is I teach these kids how to be comfortable in their own skin so that they don't have to pretend to be somebody they're not. They don't have to hide behind their challenges or pretend they're not there, so that they can use all of themselves, their strengths as well as their challenges, so they can meet the world authentically, vulnerably, and just live that full life, whether they got challenges or not.
Wow, man. That's awesome. God. we can spend a whole hour just on all of that stuff alone. Yeah. And we'll absolutely get into it. I want to come back to, you mentioned as far as like martial arts and the fighting world, you've been in that a bit with Hapkido and even the Tai Chi, yeah?
Right.
Okay, so when what part of your life did that come into play?
Well, my dad's a former Army Ranger, and he had a black belt in judo before he even joined the military. And there are a lot of stories from the military. My dad's very, very modest. He doesn't like talking about that stuff. But one of the stories I heard was that when he went in to Ranger School, the sergeant wanted to bring him up as a dummy, somebody to toss around, right? And the sergeant proceeded to try and throw my dad. And my dad set his center, and the sergeant could not get him off the ground. And then when he invited my dad to show him a thing or two, my dad totally plowed the guy. So they made my dad the instructor for the hand-to-hand combat piece.
Talk about adjustment right there.
Yeah. And he went on to do that in Ranger School. After he passed, he became the hand-to-hand instructor.
Wow.
And, and there were times where people picked fights with him in the bar, and he just totally, demolished the guy. And keep in mind, my dad is like 150 pounds soaking wet, skinny guy, but he can totally hold his own, very wiry. So I grew up with him as my dad. And when he heard that I was getting bullied.
And this was in elementary school?
It was in middle school, junior
okay.
high back in the day.
Yeah.
He took me aside and he says, I want to show you some stuff. So he started teaching me some basic punches, some kicks that I would practice. And then the day came where one of the bullies decided that he was going to use me as a way to increase his social capital. So he announced to all his friends and says, hey, walk home with me. I'm going to kick this kid's butt. Yeah. And I'm walking home and I see this crowd behind me. I had no idea what was going on. And this kid, I had no idea that he had such an issue with me. So he gets in front of me and he starts pushing me and says, hey, you're a jerk. I don't like you, whatever. And I'm puzzled because for all intents and purposes, I'm much more of a nonviolent kind of guy. So I said, hey, man, I don't want to fight you. What? I got no issue with you. What's the big deal here? And he said, well, tough. We're going to fight. And he wraps his arms around me and he starts trying to punch me in the kidneys or whatever. So I get loose. I push him back, punched him a couple times in the face, landed a solid side kick and knocked him on his butt. And I looked down at him and he was completely puzzled. And I looked at him and I said, can we stop this now? and he gets up. Yeah, he gets up and he shakes my hand and says, you okay, man? All right. And everybody else around him goes, oh, man, come on. And he walked off. And the best part about this story, besides the fact that it got around what had happened, was that his best friend, who was there watching, thought that his best friend was now a great big jerk. He saw how I handled myself. And the next day he came to my locker. He told me basically what I just told you. Hey, man, I was there yesterday. I'm so-and-so. You don't know me. I really was impressed by the way you handled yourself. Hey, would you like to come over to my house sometime? That guy became my best friend for the next 12 years.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And that's kind of what started my journey in the martial arts. And it wasn't until after chemo and I was trying to get my strength back that I decided to invest in some full-time training. And I looked around, I did the research and I found a hot keto school that was close by. And I decided go in there for an introductory lesson, got a few pointers, listened to the philosophy of the art, and decided to jump in and went in full tilt.
Wow. Oh, man, that's awesome. I want to go back though, because, I think I could definitely relate to being bullied and just the feelings around that. And when your dad approached you about, because you already knew that he was a badass, like even up to that point. And were you being bullied for a time before he actually talked to you?
Oh, I've been being bullied since I was in kindergarten.
So was that something that did that ever come to your mind that maybe my dad could teach me something?
I think it did to a degree. So one of the things to understand about my dad is that he is excruciatingly quiet. Subsequently with the diagnosis of my boys, we found out my dad has Asperger's too. And he really was not involved too much in our lives. He went and worked his butt off. He came home. He wanted to be left alone. So I really didn't have a rapport with him. He was there. He would help in the discipline when my mom would reach her melting point. But I really didn't know how to approach him. I didn't know that much about him. So it was awkward for me to have the conversation. I didn't know where to begin. So it was one day that he actually approached me.
He'd heard about it in some way.
Yeah. So I suspect mom was having conversations with him in the background saying, hey, come on, don't you know what's going on with your kid? You need to do something here.
But you were talking to your mom about all your challenges?
Oh, she was my go-to person. She knew everything that was going on.
Okay. So it took her to actually prompt your dad to approach you about this.
And knowing him, I suspect that she was talking to him about it for a while before he finally did something.
Now, when he finally approached you, I don't know if you were in your bedroom or just come back from son, come on over, or what that was like for you. What was that like?
Well, a part of it was it was exciting that he cared.
Like, because up to that point, you didn't think he cared?
No, because he never made any overtures. And my mom was the polar opposite. She was what's referred to as a smother.
Okay.
He was over involved,
Okay.
Hi, this is my smother.
Okay. I dig it.
Yeah, she has totally no real sense of boundaries, always rescuing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So the fact that he would take me aside, I can't even remember if he said why he was showing me. I just remember him saying, hey, come here. I want to show you some stuff. And then I think he gave me the hypothetical, hey, imagine somebody's coming up to you and they want to, they want to hurt you or something. This is how you start. And he showed me a basic stance. And then he started explaining to me how you hit it that way. And, the mechanics of it. And then it started showing me, some kicks, explaining to me how I'm supposed to hold my body and whatever. And I was able to go on and practice based on that. And I think, the day the showdown happened, who do you think was the first person I wanted to tell? And it was a little celebratory. I mean, it wasn't like Rudy, putting me on his shoulders and,
sure.
Carrying me out the front door. But it was a bit of a, my dad being very restrained. It was a smile on his face and like, all right, cool, way to go, Yeah.
What was the time frame between when he approached you and to when the showdown happened?
It was probably a good month.
Really? That quickly? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Because kids were picking on me every day. Whether it was verbal, with somebody threatening me or just, giving me one of those, trying to intimidate me. Kids were spitting in my hair. Sometimes they'd push me. And I think I had kind of gained some confidence from that point on. And there was one kid that was still picking on me physically.
After the showdown?
Yeah, a different kid, though.
A different kid, okay.
So I'm walking through the hall, and this kid just kind of hits me with his shoulder. So I quickly spin around. And I put both of my hands, because one of the strikes that you learn is coming this way, with the palms. And I came down and I came up on him and hit him in the chest. And he came up off his feet and I threw him into the lockers. Then I got into his face and I said, if you ever effing touch me again, I'm going to kill you. I was in a mood that day anyway. So this is not an approach that I'm recommending. Okay. I'm just saying this is how it went down.
Hey, yeah.
And again, the blood drained from his face because I'd never responded to him before. Yeah. I just took it. So in this case, not only did I respond, but it was like to the 10th degree. He gave me some looks every now and then after that, but nothing where he was trying to intimidate me.
Now that's interesting because this is one of my the guys that I follow, now, and he's more like in the self-defense type part of the martial arts. He trains like the military and law enforcement, all of that. But he says, we've been fighting since we could hunt. It's because it's just fully inside of us. So you don't have to have a technique. You don't have to have a style that you subscribe to or that you practice in order to fight. Yet, and that's something like, you hear the stories about, mothers. We'll talk about some mothers or just even regular mothers, right? When they see their babies, they're threatened. Oh man, you don't know how. They can't even tell you how they lifted that car. They couldn't tell you how they got past that assailant. Whatever it is, it just instinctual, right? But in terms of what you were talking about, you're describing your experience. You didn't. There was no reaction, right? You didn't have that reaction, that outward reaction, that instinct to fight was not released until you started getting those lessons from your dad.
My first response was submission. And I think a lot of that was because I knew I was clumsy. I was accident prone growing up, so I did not have confidence in my ability to use my body. So kids like me, I need to be taught how to use my body effectively. Then there are the kids that are the athletes, the ones that are very coordinated. They can, run the touchdown. They feel like if I stand my ground, I'm not going to be moved. And they also have some experience of that. They just feel solid in their own presence.
They've just got that practice in there.
Yeah.
Okay. They grow up playing Little League or T-ball, and then just, it escalates from there. But to your point, you're saying that you didn't really participate in sports growing up. Didn't have that.
I was never interested in it.
Never interested.
When I did try it, I would fail miserably.
So that's not, seeing as you're describing now, fail miserably. That's not really the first thought after that. Typically for a child is not to let's do it again. Let's fail miserably again.
Right, yeah. The feedback that I was getting from my relationship with the environment was that I'm not effective when I take action with my body. In my imagination, I'm free. I can do whatever I want to. When I actually try and execute in life, I feel like a damn fool. So I'm going to stop doing that.
So it took, you needed that confidence in how to use your body in that particular way.
And part of it also was necessity. It kind of got to a breaking point where I needed to take some action, or I was consigning myself to the rest of my life being this way.
Now, was that something that you were already coming to a realization of even before your dad pulled you aside, that something's got to change? Or is it just...
Well, I knew something had to change, but I was still feeling pretty helpless about it.
Okay.
Because I didn't know what my options were. I still saw some of my other buddies around me who, of course, were the athletes, who could handle themselves well. They had the muscles already. They had the coordination. And they're telling me, hey, man, you just got to do this. Or you just got to do that.
You just got to do what? Is it like when they said you just got to do this or that, was it about punching people or was it about talking your way out of it? What did they tell you?
Oh, of course, the adults were always telling me how to talk them out of it, how to take the high road, be diplomatic. These kids didn't care about diplomacy. They were all about their testosterone and their social standing. If anything, it would just egg them on if I wasn't giving them the response they wanted. They would just amp it up. But my buddies were telling me, man, you just got to punch him or you just got to, kick him here, kick him there. They were giving me tips on how to be aggressive. And that just didn't fit for me. That didn't feel like who I was, nor did it feel like something that I could follow through on. Yeah, I strike once, now they're ticked off, and they're going to pummel me. Because they didn't give me an entire instruction. They just said, well, hit him once this time or hit him once that time.
It's like, hey, Brian, just be something that you're not, which is somebody that would actually, be forceful and hit somebody out of aggression.
Right.
Oh,
and that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to things like Hapkido, because there are so many techniques. It's a very complete system that allows you to control your opponent without killing them. And you can deal with an attacker in a variety of ways. You can keep them at bay. You can wear them out. you can hold them and control them, or you can break something, depending on the level of aggression and what kind of danger you think you're in. And there are martial arts where every strike is designed to break something. And Tai Chi is one of those arts.
Yeah, I want to get into that, man. Before we do that, I just want to finish up with it's a question I have as far as going back with training with your dad. Was that just like a one-time thing that you did with him, or was it like a multiple kind of sessions that you had with him, or he said, let's do this again, let's try this another time, like a week or two later, or?
Well, after that, I began seeking him out.
Okay.
I would approach him with specific scenarios. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And he would, teach to my curiosity.
The doors opened at that point where now, I can approach him now. Yeah, it's something.
And it was actually one of the few points of connection he and I had. Because we really don't have anything in common, aside from the neurodiversity, the dyslexia and the Asperger's and stuff. And who's going to talk about that? You're not going to sit down and really bond over that.
Sure.
But I could ask him a lot of questions. And ironically, my youngest son, my 13-year-old, he's become very curious in the martial arts. And now I take him aside and I show him things. And he's doing pretty good.
Man.
So I'm paying it forward.
I'm about to lose it. So, because that is something that it's huge, right? Particularly, I know for myself as a parent, it's challenging. It can be challenging to find some ways to relate to your children, particularly as they go through their own stages and their own development. I mean, it's dynamic here, dynamic with them as well. So how do you find that way in there? I'm not talking about makeup or anything like that with them, or, stuff with their, gossipy stuff at school. But when I think about martial arts, and I mean, in my rule, it's like, they're just going to be participating, that's just the way we have it in our household. It really is, it's so rewarding on so many different levels to have kind of that bonding with them. Did you feel closer to your dad after that? After you had those training sessions with him?
I felt that he cared. And that was really kind of hard to come by. This was a man who never told me that he liked anything I did until I was 17 years old. Until that point, it was just like, whatever. My mom would try and tell him something that I had accomplished, and he'd be like, okay.
But after that point,
17, I did something, and he came to me to tell me he was kind of proud of. He didn't say the word proud. Yeah. He just told me that he liked what I did.
That was his language,
and that was his language for telling me he was proud of me. Yeah. But before then, with giving me the hand-to-hand instruction, that showed me that he cared enough about what was happening in my life that he wanted to help me create better results.
So even for you, it wasn't even so much that, now we've got this thing to bond over. It's just like night and day. It's before he didn't care, or he just at best was indifferent. Now, wow, he does care.
Now he's invested to a degree.
Regardless of what comes out of his mouth or what he shows or how he acts, now I'm feeling that he does care. He has a stake in what I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's enough.
Yeah, considering what the contrast of that was.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you mentioned, almost complete apathy.
Yeah.
To now taking an interest in a part of my life where I'm extremely vulnerable and is impacting my sense of my own value as a person. And now he's stepping in to help me change that. I don't know if he saw those layers to it, but I sure as heck felt it. And, one other thing I want to touch on is when they talk about it's good to get kids into martial arts because it helps build their confidence. They don't get too much into just what that means. And one way confidence shows up is when someone is trying to start something with you and you can stand your ground and you don't desire to prove yourself by hurting the other person. It's enough to know that you can. And you can stand with that confidence and that presence with the other person and say, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this because the only way this is going to end up is two people are going to get hurt. Is that how you want to walk away from this? You want to be hurt really bad? Because if that's what you want, I'm prepared to give you that outcome. But something tells me you don't want.
That's the thing. One of the things that, I mean, all of it stands out for me, but one of the things in your story that really stood out right from the get-go was after he was on the ground and you just having that presence of mind. Oh, can we stop this now? I don't know exactly. I forget exactly what your words were.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah,
I said,
but like,
can we stop this now?
Because here's what I'm thinking, man. Is that years of bullying, years of just taking it. It's boiling up inside, and finally it comes to a head here. Now, granted, you've got some skills now. You've got some confidence in your body, but still a lot of that emotion is still rolling. And of course, he said, he might have stopped, but there were other challenges still afterwards too, with other people. I don't think anyone would have faulted you for just going crazy, just like, just like all of it just coming out in rage and fists and, it just being just a lot uglier than what you described. How is it that you were able to do that?
I think I'm a reincarnated monk or something.
Okay.
I've got a big heart. I'm more inclined
even when you were suffering then.
I was the kid who was more likely to cry because somebody else was crying. I was born with a lot of empathy. I'm more inclined to respond to suffering with compassion than to respond to it with, oh man, that person's down, let's kick him harder. So even though I knocked this kid on his butt, for some reason, I saw the way to respond as compassion, not, all right, he's down, let's go in there and make him my bitch.
That was you. That was you already.
Yeah, that was kind of how I've seen things, yeah.
Now, is that something that you feel, like it might be a little challenge to answer, but like, was that just innate, or is that something you learned over time?
I've absolutely refined it. Because in today's world, there are a lot of things that challenge the capacity to live like that. So when, about 5 years or so after I got out of chemo, and I found myself really struggling with anger and mistrust, and I didn't want to live that way. So I was looking for some philosophical way of thinking to help me find my way back to that kind of softer side, and I found Zen Buddhism. And I found myself a teacher to teach me the meditation and so on. And I've been doing that for like 25 years now. And that's the practice that has really allowed me to be much more compassionate and human on a deeper level. Because, yeah, we can be warlike and we can be fighting, but there also has to be that humanity that allows us to function as community members, not just adversaries.
There are levels to it. I mean, like you say, like that's what happened as you got older. But I mean, again, particularly as a younger child, where I deal with it all the time with my kids. There's just raw emotion. There's so much, and like if it's not released in a productive way in some way, whether it's talking through it or it's giving them some sort of other outlet, it can be a challenging situation. Yet, you still had enough of that empathy, that feeling of empathy, that compassion towards other people, that it overrode any of the release of emotion around this, at least this particular instance.
Yeah, vengeance to me wasn't something that really, I got scared by those kind of feelings. Where I felt like, oh, I'm going to go and burn this person's house down, or I'm going to kill him or whatever. Not that the thoughts weren't entertaining.
Yes.
Because you got that ticked off. But the idea of doing those things would scare me.
Yeah.
So then I would start backing myself down. But there are people out there who get swept up in that and get so blinded by their rage that they would do it. And the prisons are full of them. But for some reason, I would get scared of those feelings and it would help back me down.
Because like you got done what you needed to get done, and then immediately the empathy kicks in. You see somebody now that is, I mean, you're describing him like his skin was flushed. I mean, like it's like I felt like I was there as you were describing it. So that's how vivid it is in terms of like, wow, this is somebody that is in shock right now, that they are coming up against a challenge right now, and immediately you go to your natural state, which is, okay, let's, I'm thinking about how he's feeling right now.
Well, and also an important part of empathy is you being able to see yourself in that person's shoes.
Yeah.
So I remembered how I felt when I was in that situation. And again, it does not make sense to me to want to make someone else feel the way I've resented feeling all these years of my life. To me, that did not create social justice. That just perpetuated victimization. I wanted two people to feel good. I didn't want two people to feel bad.
Right. And ultimately, if that's the goal, of your life anyway, up to that point, I mean, that's just naturally how you're just gonna it might have, the compass goes this way and that way real quick, but this is where it always comes back to that true north of who you were at that time. Fantastic, man. So it was like, you got that confidence in your body. You had some challenges with the chemo and the cancer, and then you found Hapkido. You felt so. Tell me a bit about that, because definitely a different part of your life now. You said even that bully's best friend became your best friend. Later. So very different stage of your life, very different challenges. Absolutely. What brought you to looking for something?
What brought me to looking for something is, first, I wanted to get myself back into shape.
Okay.
And because chemo just kicks the life out of you. You're so weak afterwards. I mean, I couldn't walk a block without feeling like I just ran a marathon. And I needed something I could afford to do. We're talking back in the early 90s. There wasn't a gym on every corner. I didn't like the idea of bulking up. That just didn't seem to be who I was. I still enjoyed the martial arts. Steven Seagal's first movie had come out a couple of years earlier.
Can't talk about martial arts without the movies, man.
Yeah. I discovered Bruce Lee when I was a kid. Yeah. Enter the Dragon, just in awe of all that. So there were these role models for how you could be as a martial artist, what things you could accomplish. So it was my life experiences showing me that this was a good way to go, just in terms of self-protection in this world. It could make you healthier, more fit. It was good exercise. And, it allowed me to take several things I discovered on a smaller scale and take them up a notch or several notches. And also, I liked the vibe in that dojo.
Okay. That's really important, right? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
The person that I had my introductory session with was the guy that owned the place.
Okay.
Master.
Okay.
And he was joking around. He was, kind of happy-go-lucky. He wasn't one of those bow to your sunset. He wasn't
Cobra Kai guy.
No, he because I would have been intimidated like that, and I probably would have walked out. But because he was so approachable, it felt safer to be there. It's almost like I could come and play a little bit, but it was also some serious business. And then when my first class is there, after I signed up, he paired me off with somebody, and that person was a big teddy bear. So you see these people that are practicing their stuff, and they're slamming and throwing and all that stuff, but they're always like sticking their hand out to help the guy out that they just threw. So there was a lot of camaraderie there, and people were patient. They were humble. It wasn't about who was the biggest badass in the dojo. There was a real sense of community there. And for somebody who still felt pretty clumsy and was afraid of looking bad in front of these people that were otherwise athletes or more skilled, I didn't get the feeling that I was being sized up or compared. I got the feeling I was being supported. And that made it a lot easier to show up all the time, to make mistakes, and ask for clarification on how to do a technique correctly. And it was really an ideal learning environment.
Did you ever, even with all that though, of course you've got the curriculum that you're going through, and they'll still present challenges. I find like even I reflect back on my journey even up to this point in martial arts. There have been a couple walls that I've hit. There've been a couple of times where it's like, man, this is rougher than I expected, one way or another. Whether there was like a test at some point, whether it was a demo I did, whether it was even like my black belt test and all that kind of stuff. Did you ever hit any of those times where you kind of questioned or you kind of like doubted a bit of your where you were in your training?
Oh yeah. What ultimately led to my kind of tapping out of the whole process is I wasn't able to get the kicks as high as they wanted me to give them when doing the forms, and I found that my knees were starting to give out more. And now, all these years looking back, the Ehlers-Danlos with the ligaments and everything stretching out. And no matter how much I would do the exercises and work at building my muscles up, I couldn't figure out why my body couldn't handle it. But now, all these years later, I'm like, that's why.
Yeah.
My ligaments and my tendons couldn't handle the pressure I was putting on them.
What was that like when you had to when you had to come to that decision? Because how long had you been doing it up to that point?
Like 4 years.
Oh man! And you said you were pretty much all in on that place.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got to brown belt level.
Yeah.
And the real cool thing was when I finally I stopped going, and then the test that I was supposed to test for, the brown belt test. A couple of my friends at the dojo invited me to come back. And I didn't want to because, missing out and all that stuff, but they got me. I can't remember how, but they got me there.
Okay.
And what I didn't know was going on behind the scenes was that the black belts who'd been teaching me convinced the master to give me the brown belt anyway, because they'd watched me during practices and they said, trust me, he knows his stuff. He knows what he's doing. He's earned this. Just because he can't be here for the test doesn't mean he doesn't deserve it. So they awarded me the brown belt anyway. So it was very cool.
That's interesting. So you got, and then after you got the brown belt, and that you just said that's like you'd already been. You kind of like it wasn't necessarily just like a quick, okay, like a sudden, okay, I'm stopping now. It was like probably over time. It just kind of built.
Yeah,
you
it was
weren't
over the course of a couple
anymore.
months where my joints just kept getting worse, and I was starting to get vertigo when I was doing the spin kicks, which I now understand is because my cervical vertebrae are too loose.
Okay.
So when I would spin and kind of whip my head around or whatever, well, when you've got vertebrae that are sliding like that, and I won't use too many terms here, but your vestibular system, your proprioception loses track of where your body is in space, has difficulty righting itself. So you start to get dizzy.
Gotcha.
So as my neck and everything were getting stretched out, I would spin and the room would keep going, even though I stopped.
Yeah. The negatives of actually training were starting to much outweigh the positives, ultimately.
Yeah, so it was mainly the dizziness that just kept getting worse that made me stop. Because if you can't even get past the warm-up before you've even started practicing, what the heck are you doing there?
Yeah, I hear. But then, so how does Tai Chi come into this then?
Well, I was looking for something that, again, could get me back in the martial arts, was not hard on my joints.
Okay. So now, was this before or after your diagnosis?
Many years later.
Okay.
Many years later.
Okay.
I had been out of Hapkido probably close to 10 years. So when I'd gotten married and I wanted to start back the martial arts again, and I found Tai Chi, and it was all about the slow form. You could take it easy on your body. You could get a sense of how things were. How are my hips feeling? How is my back feeling? And you could take it easy on yourself, but there's nothing, just because it looks soft and slow, doesn't mean it's weak.
Yeah. Before we get into that, let me ask you though, because I have a similar experience with Tai Chi, and I only took one lesson. But typically when, at least back in the day, I don't know how they do it nowadays, but a lot of the way that they marketed Tai Chi was very much like that, very flowing, very peaceful. Typically, it was like older people that were in commercials and photos for it. What was your reaction to making that link now between, because you were looking for something a bit softer, a bit more flowing, a bit easier on your joints. Yet when I don't know if it was when you actually came in and talked to somebody and started getting your lessons where you started realizing, whoa, there's more to this than meets the eye, or was it before that?
I had known of Tai Chi, but I didn't know the extent of it. And there are different forms of Tai Chi, just like there are different forms of Kung Fu, different styles of Hapkido, and so on. But the style that I studied was Tai Chi Chuan, which is Chuan is fist. So it was a fighting style of Tai Chi. So they had the long form of all the different slow movements, but then there was a martial application for every move. And it was all full body. Everything you do, your entire body's behind it, whether it's a joint lock, whether it's a kick, whether it's a punch. And when he explained to me the background of the Tai Chi style that he learned, his teacher was from China, a grandmaster, who instructed the Chinese military. So they're not going to go in there teaching them how to fight with feathers. And he demonstrated with one of his students how different, he'd show me how it looked in the form, then he would show me how the martial application looked. And of course, I immediately said, I could get into this.
That's great, man.
So I started studying and, I learned a lot. I was there for a couple of years. It takes longer to learn Tai Chi because of how intricate it is. There's so many things that need to be in coordination simultaneously or the technique just falls apart.
Now, did you feel that your body was challenged going from those slower, longer forms to the actual application, the martial application of it, or?
Again, I didn't know yet about the Ehlers-Danlos.
Oh, you didn't know yet. Okay,
the joints, and there were some really serious joint locks and stuff in Tai Chi, and I would find that after having a joint lock applied, it would hang around for weeks. So when other people were having these techniques applied to them and they were shaking it off, for me, it would linger and joints would stiffen up and it was harder to do the technique the next time around. And again, I was baffled by this. Like, how come I can't handle this?
Right.
And then what ended up happening is when I got married, we moved like an hour away and it just logistically became too complicated to keep up with going to lessons.
Gotcha. Wow, man. That's awesome. quite a road with all this, Brian. Let me ask you, you mentioned your son. Is it your youngest son? You started to work with him?
My youngest.
A bit about that. How did that process go? Was it similar to what you described with your father and how he worked with you? Or did it come about in a different way?
Well, I've been reluctant for some time to show him anything because each of my boys has impulse issues because of the ADHD. So my biggest concern with him was that he was going to use it because he didn't understand his own power. He would just think, oh, let me show so-and-so how it's done, and just walks up to him and puts him in a joint lock or something. And then me getting a phone call from the school trying to explain to me why my child is out there hurting kids.
Right.
So I wanted to be sure that he could be responsible before I showed him anything. And when I saw that he was picking up some things on his own and really wasn't using them on his brothers, and of course, those are the most convenient targets and the most deserving most of the time, and that he wasn't using it, I'm like, okay, I think I can trust him to demonstrate some discretion here.
Gotcha. Now, did you have similar thoughts and approach with your other two boys as well? Or is it just they just didn't have any? They weren't interested.
They weren't interested. No.
So was it such that they had already gone to other sports, had other interests that that really met that need for them, or?
All my boys are nerds. They could care less about anything physical. They want electronics and bugs and Pokemon and movies and.
But your youngest he's open to it, and he's
very kinesthetic. He likes using his body. He likes moving.
Gotcha. That's it just makes much more sense with him.
Mm-hmm. And he would watch the martial arts movies with me. He saw the Steven Seagal and the Bruce Lee and all that other stuff, and then he was fascinated by it. He loves watching parkour videos.
Oh, yeah.
And, he's kind of clumsy like Dad, so he can't do some of the ambitious stuff, but he loves the rolls. And I started seeing him in the park doing these rolls. And I'm like, dude, that's a pretty awesome shoulder roll. Where did you learn that? And it was something I learned my first day in Hapkido was how to do a shoulder roll. And I saw him self-taught with this.
Yeah.
And to see him go to the lengths to learn how to do this, he definitely had the motivation. So, started exploring what was his interest, where was he learning these things, what assumptions had he already made about these various things. And now lately I'm showing him more stuff.
That's great. Now, I mean, you got him, and looking back now, as we talked about this, like, we're always fighting something. That's always just my thing. Inside or outside the ring, inside or outside the dojo. We've already talked about some of your struggles outside as well, definitely in the inside here. What is your approach? What are your thoughts around that with your children? Aside from similar diagnoses, having some of those things in common, but even just the fact of them just being your boys, and they're much more kind of nerdy. They're not so much into sports and that stuff. Very similar to what you described yourself being growing up. How does that come to your mind when you think about bullying? When you think about what you had gone through and how that may or may not be happening or applied in one way or another to your boys?
As much as possible, my life is about creating or restoring harmony. So if you're dealing with somebody that's pissed off about whatever it is, it's one of their internal demons, it's a misunderstanding between you and they want to escalate it or create some kind of an aggressive confrontation. I want to find a way to make that much more balanced, harmonious, peaceful. And you want to do that with an attacker as much as possible. That's much more the fluid thinking of Aikido and Hapkido. It's harmonizing with the aggression. If there's a school of thinking out there, non-confrontational communication or nonviolent communication, where it's talking to a person in a way where it's not personal. You're not attacking them. You're talking about the shared experience, as opposed to it's you and it's me and you're wrong and I'm right. And that immediately creates this. So I'm constantly on the lookout for things that are going to create balance and harmony, as opposed to opportunities to be competitive.
So it's not necessarily such that you think that they have to have their own showdowns to and cover.
You're gonna bump up against resistance from anything you have not learned to harmonize with yet, and that's going to be your own fears, your own self-doubts, and until you have learned its nature and learned a degree of acceptance or letting go of it, you're gonna have some headbutting with it. Whenever you think you've learned enough or grown enough, guess what? That's when something new shows up. Because when things seem to be smooth sailing for a while, that simply means that maybe you've made peace with, or you have developed the skills needed to address all of the problems that you've already encountered in life. But when a new problem suddenly shows up that you have never dealt with before, suddenly you're going to experience some resistance, some upset, some sadness, some negative internal dialogue, because you have yet to develop the emotional and psychological muscle and the resilience to handle this. But once you develop those things, now you've achieved that balance again. So yeah, there's always something internal or external that's showing itself.
So, but kind of comparing to what your father did for you, your father approached you, pulled you aside, showed you some moves, right? When you talk about harmony and trying to find a bit more of that, having more of that empathy, having that understanding for what's coming, how do you impart that? It's easier when I can pull my daughters aside and say, okay, this is the stance, this is what you got to do, or whatever. I think I have more of a challenge. I just wouldn't know where to go for what you're talking about in terms of how do I impart that. And I understand where it's coming from. I value that as an adult, seeing a lot more now. Bringing that down, not say down, just imparting that value and that mindset to a child, let alone your own child. How do you do that?
I first help them examine the results they're getting versus the results they want. So when they would come to me saying, oh, so-and-so is picking on me, I just want to punch them in the face. No, yeah, you can do that. What comes after that? Then what? Well, then they're going to know how mad I am. Okay. And how might they respond to you? Oh, they might punch me. Okay, then it's your turn now. What do you do? And they actually think it through instead of just reacting. And at some point they realize that, okay, we're both going to end up in detention. We're both going to get in trouble. Where the kid's stronger. He's probably going to get his friends. Great. So you see this escalation happening. Is that the result you want? Well, no. Okay, so what other options do we have? It's like what Bruce Lee taught. You don't teach forms and all that stuff. You teach what's effective. You teach what is going to ultimately work. And it also has to work for the individual. So a lot of people that practice styles, they are taught to the style as opposed to shaping the style to the individual as well. If only we'd had that man around for longer teaching this kind of stuff. But when I teach my youngest, I'm not teaching, okay, this is the form and this is why you do this. He talks to me about things he sees at school, the ways he sees people being aggressive, that he thinks he might encounter, and I will teach him to his environment. When people go off to, Krav Maga was not developed for the lady who's afraid of having her purse snatched. Okay? It's the Israelis that are fighting terrorists, where you're going to do anything and everything you need to do to survive, and you're not looking to make friends. So a lot of that is contextual. But for my boys, it's all about what's practical for what it is you're trying to accomplish. And of course, it stays in line with my philosophy as well. You want to send a message without permanently altering somebody's anatomy.
I think the thing that's really stood out to me, and all that was amazing, is that they're coming to you. They're telling you these things. They're telling you about their day. They're telling you about what they say. But again, just contrasting with what you had experienced growing up yourself, that you didn't feel like you had that door was available to you to talk to your dad about those things. It's huge, and I think for me, and the things that I think about and I see in not just the industry, but even like in martial arts industry, but even just parenting alone, is like the question is a lot of times is, what do I do in this situation? What do I do about this? If my kid experiences this? Whereas when I'm through what we're talking about right now, it's like, well, can they come to you with it? Are they? Would you even know right from your child's mouth that they're having these challenges? So it's like a different thing altogether. Mm-hmm. Ryan, this was awesome, man. We're doing this again. Because I really want. Aside from just the knowledge you just dropped here, I know there's so much more that. That we can get into, particularly in the work that you're doing, helping folks through their challenges with with ADHD and the unique way that you're offering that help to them. So a lot of ways we can go there, man. Absolutely. So if you're cool coming back.
Oh, absolutely, man. Just let me know when.
Yeah, it's good stuff, dude. All right, I'm gonna let you go.
Been a pleasure, Phil.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. This is good stuff. Guys, I hope you really enjoyed that video as much as I enjoyed chatting with Brian. As I said at the end there, I am really hoping to have him back to talk about some of the ways that he's helping folks with their fights and their families' fights with ADHD and similar diagnoses. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.